Everyone, welcome to this afternoon's Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel. Just remind everybody that this meeting is being webcast, so please make sure you're using microphones when talking and introduce yourself, to which extent I'm Councillor Malcolm Treevey, covering as chair today in the absence of Councillor Robin Moss. Can I ask for the emergency evacuation procedure, please?
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. Designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence? None? Okay, cool. And any declarations of interest? No? Anybody? Okay. Agenda item 5 is urgent business agreed by the Chair. There is none that I'm aware of. Which brings us to item 6, which is public and councillor statements, for which I believe Councillor Joe Wright would like to make a 3-minute statement. Let's go to you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair, for your time today. I'm speaking on 2 separate items. Firstly, following the full Council sign-off of the budget in February, the Green Group proposed an amendment that we were clearly told by the Cabinet Member for Resources to bring to this corporate PDS. I am therefore asking for your support in this matter. That is, the buying of additional software to accurately model changes to council tax support to be bought by Baines Council, and for the appropriate team to use this software to accurately model potential changes to the council tax support scheme. This software will allow officers to gain better knowledge of recipients' positions within bands on the council tax support scheme, to explore and review how we can support the most vulnerable people in our community better by ensuring that our council tax support scheme is brought in line with recent and upcoming changes. For example, the carers allowance was uprated by the government in spring 2025, and the 2-child benefit cap will be lifted later in the year. Our local tax support scheme is aligned with Universal Credit Standard allowance and certain elements such as the housing element is not taking into account other universal credit elements. For example, suppose Mrs. Smith used to receive 85% discount on her council tax, and Mrs. Smith also receives carers allowance, and this carers allowance was recently uplifted by the government by £35 per month. This has now resulted in Mrs. Smith being moved to a lower band of council tax support, i.e. a 60% discount. Her council tax bill has therefore increased by £75 per month, whilst her income has only increased by £35 per month. This therefore leaves Mrs. Smith £40 per month worse off. This does not seem fair at all at a time when those who are poorest need more support. The Green Group does recognise that the Council has a hardship provision, but this is temporary and requires those most vulnerable to know how to access it. The purchase of this additional software will enable officers to model the various band thresholds and see how we can support those most vulnerable in our community. Please could I ask that this committee finds a way to support this purchase and ensure that the corporate PDS forward plan manages this work so that cross-party we all support those most vulnerable in our community. This work would hopefully allow residents a better way to manage their finances too.
Thank you. The council tax reduction scheme is back with this panel in the summer, so we can factor that into the proposal which comes through from them and see if that's a move we can support going forward.
Can officers actually buy the software in the short term? It's £4,500.
Yep.
No, as I said at full council, it's fine for them to. They've said that they can do that within their current operational budget. So, if they need the software to do the modelling, they can buy the software to do the modelling. Yeah.
Does anyone have any factual questions they'd like to ask? Toby?
Yeah, I mean, are you aware that's not the only benefit change that has an impact on council tax reduction, because migration of ESA to universal credit also affects council tax reduction schemes. This committee keeps a pretty close eye annually on the council tax reduction scheme, but big changes to it are expensive.
Yes, we appreciate that, but equally, unless you have the software, you can't do the modelling, so this gives you the opportunity to do the modelling.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Did you have something else you wanted to talk as well? Yeah.
Thank you. Secondly, in May 2024, this committee had an agenda item titled Debate Not Hate, following the unanimous support for the Labour motion of that same title in March 2024. The agenda item recommended 2.2 to provide input and a steer in the proposed plans to provide further support for members and officers on their safety and well-being whilst undertaking council business. And 2.3, agree to take further reports and recommendations following a regular review of support available to members and officers in respect of abuse, intimidation and safety. In the last few months, I experienced intimidation and felt unsafe to the point of calling the police on the matter. I will not go into details, but I have a crime reference number. I promptly contacted the council to inform them of this, only to find out that the online link did not work, that the forms for me to fill in were inappropriate. It took nearly 2 months to meet with an officer to explain in full what had taken place. This really upset me, as the very organisation that I thought would and should have appropriate support in place did not. The last few months have been a battle to be heard by this organisation, and this has caused me further distress. Suffice to say, in my experience, this council does not have a support system in place. I would not want any other councillor to experience what I have gone through. I think it is important for this committee to take up this serious matter, especially with local elections looming. There is a real rise in threatening behaviour, and no one in the public domain should have their families frightened for them on Christmas Day or any other day. I would ask that this committee asks, 1, for a cross-party working group to look at all the present Baines documents and the system of support in place and reviews them. 2, ask what and when and when was the last review carried out. 3, obtain a safeguarding procedure for Baines Council. 4, speak to the CEO and Baines expressing concern on this matter about the way in which this case has been handled so far and asking what steps Democratic Services will take to ensure councillors are aware of such risks and the reporting mechanisms in place. Sorry, I've printed off my wrong thing. So basically, I would... there was also the issue about the police and Operation Ford and what trial runs councillors have to ensure that mechanisms work. And 7, to bring back to corporate PDS all the actions and to make sure that they have taken place. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless you've got anything you want to respond with that at the moment, then we can forward that statement on to Kevin and the leader's office for response, I think, from there. Has anyone got any factual questions they want to go against? Colin?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry to hear of the experience, but you mentioned about inappropriate forms. Do you know what has been concluded from that 2-month period where the support wasn't there for you? Has anything moved on? Or are you saying that we've not improved anything to look after both staff and councillors if this happens again?
I think there is stuff in place for officers, but I don't think there's anything in place for councillors. I am not aware of an updated form. I have not yet seen that. All that I have had is a one-to-one meeting with an officer where they took down my incident and have written that up. But apart from that, I am not aware of any online form that if something like this happened today to anybody else, that they could easily fill in. I'm also quite cross that this has taken place. That, you know, you had the debate not hate in 2024, this is 2026. This item came to this PDS panel, yet nothing has been followed up, and there is nothing in place to support any councillor, and I don't care what the political colour is, to make sure that they don't ever feel like this again and have the appropriate support in place.
Chair, obviously, you know, we've got a major deficiency here in process, and quite rightly we're talking of a 2-year process since that vote took place. I appreciate you've just said you would pass a statement on, but as the scrutiny panel for corporate PDS, quite rightly, this should sit with us. Can we take a further action whether that's an agenda item to bring officers to demonstrate to us that they've put something suitable in place?
Yeah, we can act a forward plan to review here. Yeah, for sure.
Apologies, but I do think I was meant to have in my notes that it should really go on your forward plan as the next action. Thank you.
Councillor David.
Thanks. Joanna, I'm really sorry to hear about this as well. I would be happy to see this on the forward plan for this committee, but I also wanted to ask whether you've had the opportunity to raise these concerns with the new Chief Exec.
Throughout this process, I have been emailing her on this. I have now met with her and explained the situation. I don't want to go into detail because I don't think that's fair on her, but she is aware of it. But I would say that I repeatedly did have to send a form and say that the form was inappropriate. And it got to the point where I showed it to both my husband and my son and said, is this the appropriate form for somebody who's been through what I've been to fill in? And they both laughed and went, no. So that shows the problem that we have. And no councillor should be put in this position.
Anyone? Thank you very much for your statements and also trying to hear of your experience. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7. That's the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have confirmation that they were correct record, please? Anyone? Councillor David, maybe a seconder. Councillor Simon. All agreed? Thank you. Agreed. And that brings us to agenda item 8, the Cabinet Member Update. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So, since the last panel, we've obviously passed a budget at full council, which has been a major part of my activity, but I did want to update the panel actually about a specific change to a government grant that I think the panel should be aware of, namely the Household Support Fund. This is being replaced by the Crisis and Resilience Fund, so we're moving from the HSF to the CRF. Our funding from the new CRF will be £316,000 lower, reducing from just over 1.9 million to just over 1.6 million. But importantly, probably more importantly, the rules around what we're allowed to do with that money are changing. Over recent years, we've been using the HSF to provide free school meal vouchers during school holidays to support many families in Bath North East Somerset, particularly during the pandemic and the unprecedented cost of living pressures that followed that. The government has now confirmed that councils will no longer be permitted to operate blanket holiday voucher schemes once the current Household Support Fund is replaced by the Crisis and Resilience Fund. We're just not allowed to use it for that purpose. This is a national policy shift which affects all local authorities, and our approach will therefore be aligned to councils across the UK. As a result, the council's blanket free school meal voucher offer will come to an end after the summer holidays in this year, in 2026. To support families through this change, we will contact all households currently receiving vouchers directly to explain clearly what's changing, why it's changing, and most importantly, what help will continue to be available. We want families to have reassurance and certainty well ahead of the transition. No changes will take place immediately, as I say, and the arrangements are already planned for the school holidays in the 2025-26 academic year, and will continue as expected until the end of the summer holidays this year. Our priorities remain the same: to ensure that children and families in Bath and North East Somerset receive timely, meaningful support when they need it. And over the coming months, we'll engage with schools and partners and affected families to ensure that the transition is well understood and that support remains accessible and responsive. Although universal vouchers cannot continue under the new framework, we remain firmly committed to supporting children, young people and families experiencing financial hardship. The new Crisis and Resilience Fund will enable us to provide targeted, needs-based support, ensuring that help reaches the households facing greatest pressure. The aim is to focus support more effectively on the families experiencing acute hardship, to provide a broader package of help, not just food support, but also help with other living costs and measures which strengthen financial resilience, and to work more closely with schools and community partners to identify and respond to emerging needs within communities. My request to this panel is that you make some time available, hopefully in your May meeting, so that I can bring a more detailed report to you to allow you to understand the new rules that we're working under and to scrutinise the way that we are planning to use the new Crisis and Resilience Fund in light of those new rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions? Councillor Blackburn.
Yeah. Could I just ask, Councillor, the current 1.9 million budget, how much of that as a percentage were we using for that meal scheme?
You may need to give me a second to just look up the spreadsheet. And if I can't get it now, I will come back to you with an answer. Unless Stuart's got it. Okay, thank you.
We had another question, so we could come back.
Yeah, okay, that would be great, Stuart, if you can look that up and then we'll...
Councillor Simon?
Councillor Simon.
Toby?
Yeah.
Thank you. Declaring an interest as a volunteer with Citizens Advice, I think HSF Household Support Fund funds some of the fuel vouchers they give to people who are seeking advice and support. Can you ensure that they're consulted about the changes from one fund to another, both about anything they're doing as a sub-programme and more generally?
I'm certainly happy to make sure they're consulted, yes.
Anybody else? Questions? Are we there?
So it's just under 42%.
I know that the cost to provide the cost for providing the free school meal vouchers through to the end of the summer from the new fund, which I say we're going to carry on to the end of the summer. So for Easter, May half term and the summer, the cost for that is 553,000.
Can I just clarify? Is you saying that's carrying on from the previous fund?
No,
or the
no, we are going to use some of the new Crisis and Resilience Fund to carry on funding it through to the end of the summer, so that there isn't a cliff edge change.
And we have permission to do that?
Well, we've told them that that's what we're going to do.
It is another it's a £500,000 exposure, as I just think.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We don't believe we're going to get pushback on trying to introduce some transitional arrangement. We have been clearly told that we cannot do it long term.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott, and we'll consider that for our work plan when we come up on the work plan discussions later in the agenda. Moving on then, we come to agenda item 9, which is the AI update in response to the council motion which we had in the recent council. We come into Mr. Abbott, or we're going to Mark?
I'll introduce.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the item is coming to you as a result of the motion in full council, where you were asked to review the current operational AI practices and policies and consider whether a comprehensive AI policy, strategic and operational, should be developed, and if so, what factors it should address. You should have seen two key documents in the agenda pack. The AI Year in Review, which sets out how AI tools are now being used across a range of services in the Council, and the Council's existing generative AI policy, which provides our current framework for safe, ethical and responsible use of text-based AI tools. Taken together, these documents show that the organisation is already making a practical use of AI to support staff and improve efficiency, from Copilot to Magic Notes, through Zoom AI and customer services and some specialist tools in Send. They also show that we already have clear rules in place around accuracy, data protection, transparency, ethics and risk management. What the full Council motion now asks the panel to consider is these foundations and whether and to provide any thoughts on whether we need to go further, perhaps thinking about areas of governance, risk management, workforce skills, resident-facing applications. But really it's for the panel to decide what they want to do with this. The reports set out the current landscape of tools, governance and safeguards. The panel is invited to explore whether a broader AI policy or strategy is required in their view, and if so, what should be in scope. I think that's all I want to add, really. So you have the documents. With your permission, Chair, I'll hand back to you to begin a discussion.
Okay. Anyone like to speak?
Just to introduce myself, I'm Liam. I'm the Head of Digital and Customer Experience, and I lead the teams that are working on AI across the Council, working with services, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It's me. Councillor Bridge.
Hi, yeah, I'm Stuart Bridge. So a couple of questions. In the review document, it talked about 5,200 hours saved. Are we monitoring the cost of the AI, the licenses and what we're doing, and just checking that that's providing value for money? Do you want me to just ask all my questions, or go one by one? Or?
I'm happy to answer them in turn if that would be easier, just because it could possibly lose track of thought. So picking up on cost, we are deliberately tracking the usage of the tools and how efficient they are, because we want to know whether the investment we've made in the tools and the solutions are outweighing any efficiencies gained or any improvements in service, etc. We aren't netting those costs off, though, against things like staff reduction or any other netted costs. So they are additional costs, but they give it such great benefit. Hopefully that is demonstrated in the AI Year in Review that we just want to ascertain, are we using them to the best capabilities? Can we expand them further? So that's mainly why we're tracking the usage of the tools, because if they start going down and down and down, well, they're not working as well as they could. If they're continuing to expand and get better usage, then we know we're on the right track.
So I think you've already answered my next question, which was going to be, are we keeping a register of everywhere where AI is being used? But it sounds like that's yes.
So yes, we are, but we're not, because there's so many people using it now and so many prompts, we're not actively reviewing every single prompt. So 150,000 users of AI over the last 6 months, for example, we wouldn't be, minute detail. But yes, we are tracking the usage across services and then implementing where things like Send, for example, or social care, where there's some real great improvements in service and efficiencies to be had.
And then the last one, so in that same document, the quote was that AI is not a decision-making tool, that still rests with the human. Generally when I look at companies where I used to work and talk to colleagues and see how they're using it, they generally report how it's improving their efficiency. But there was one study of research chemists, and they found that generally when using AI, they were far more productive in terms of finding new compounds, but the job satisfaction for those chemists was basically going down. So one question I guess would have, because obviously a risk is that employees end up just proofreading what the AI outputs, but also still being responsible for what comes out of that decision. So are we, as part of our sort of regular surveys of council employees, are we including questions about, you know, how AI use is affecting their job satisfaction and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you take Magic Notes as a prime example in social care, so one where previously the in-person meetings, such as a care assessment, for example, a social worker will be trying to scribble notes at the same time as having that conversation, whereas now they're engaged fully in that conversation with the resident and the service user, knowing that it's being recorded and that minutes are being taken. So we've got some great quotes, happy to share them. They're public in terms of from our actual social workers, for example, in that scenario, saying how it's revolutionised, saved us 5 hours a week, 6 hours a week. We're also not forcing the use of AI on anyone, just for clarity, just following up on your point there. There are some social workers who don't use it as much, and that's fine. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Hounsell, please.
Yes, thank you. Right, a couple of questions, really. You're obviously an officer in a senior position, but who do you answer to with your work on AI?
So I report to Simon Parker, the Executive Director of Resources. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And also, speaking generally, you're talking about the sort of uses of AI, the functions of AI. But as in the Green Party motion, it raised the issue of ethics. And I can't give an example, but it may be that something arises, the use of AI within the council, that actually doesn't stand up very well to ethical scrutiny. So who would take responsibility for that? Who would be looking and checking for the ethical dimension?
Yeah, great point, and it's something that we're reviewing at the moment. So we've recently had an AI ethics review for a product for our Community Wellbeing Hub. And if you don't, I don't know if you know our Community Wellbeing Hub, great service where they're looking to introduce an AI decision and a decision assist tool, I suppose would be the best way to describe it. But that one is going further than perhaps we've gone before because it's recommending things to our service users, and that requires a much higher level of scrutiny. So yes, we have an AI ethics committee made up of relevant stakeholders in the council. We're actually firming up the terms of reference for that at the moment because this is new for us, I'll be frank. So we're putting that in place at the moment, but it's where it's no longer a aid, but suggesting a decision or making a recommendation itself. That's in particular where we need to make sure we get it right.
Thank you. If I just follow up on that, yes, it's good to hear that there is an embryo, at least, an AI ethics committee. Is that just made up of volunteers? You know, who would be on this committee, and would it include people right across the workforce?
So at the moment, it's primarily relevant senior officers. So myself, for example, our head of business information, who deals with ethics around data and research and our use of data, and etc. That's John Poole. Also our head of information governance, Rob Long. So it's primarily made up at the moment of sort of senior stakeholders in relevant areas. It's still pretty new, so I'm going to be honest, we need to expand its membership.
One last thing on that. Would the minutes of your meetings be available publicly, or would they be private? Would you envisage reporting on a regular basis back to this committee, the work of the ethics committee?
Yes, sure. I think it would be worth perhaps drafting the terms of reference and getting them reviewed. In terms of making things public, so you'll all have had the AI year in review. That's an internal version. We are right now writing the external public-facing version of that. It will go on our website. We're going to be incredibly transparent about that. It will focus on where we're using AI and where our residents and service users may interact with it. And that's going to continually be updated as we do more. But regarding the AI ethics and that, we are still quite quite fresh. So we're literally drafting the terms of reference at the moment, and happy to bring that back at a suitable time.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question about accuracy. You know, things like magic notes. I've been on a global budget meeting earlier today, and there were 7 AI note takers on it, and it was like, okay, of which 3 were forwarded on to me and a colleague afterwards as registered people on this call. So there's about 12, 13 of us on the call. Those 3 had slightly different interpretations of what had been discussed. And this, we're talking of a global budget programme, and I see that in my adoption in a personal level and work, that accuracy of that recording from those note-taking is are we evaluating the time for people to check and make sure that the accuracy is there, and how do we monitor people to make sure that they're not just filing it as an accurate record?
Yeah, just try and unpack that one a little bit. But yes, so accuracy is improving for AI in general, but of the 3 main tools that we use, which is Magic Notes for our in-person ambient voice AI, Microsoft for our primarily internal Copilot AI, and Zoom for our resident and service facing. The reason we've got those 3 is because Copilot is not very good at an in-person ambient voice AI, for example. If we were recording on Copilot and recording on Magic Notes, I'm bet some money that the Magic Notes one will be a significantly better quality of that recording, but also it's configured for templates for the type of interaction. If it's a care assessment, it knows what it's expecting to hear. It has a better dictionary of terms, whereas a generalist AI, such as Microsoft Copilot, is not as good at more specific types of interaction unless it's been configured. So I hope that answers a little bit about why we use different tools. In terms of monitoring the accuracy, it's about configuring the templates. It's about talking to the service users and saying, is it working, or seeing a dip in usage and saying, well, maybe we can configure it a bit better. And then coming back to your final point about monitoring, if members of staff are just agreeing it's a correct record without necessarily reviewing, that's something that the heads of service and the service managers need to, you know, we advise them and we put training in place for that, but that's something that has to be done at a service level rather than a sort of central digital level.
Councillor David.
Thank you. Thanks for the information you've already provided. Some of the questions I had were around governance. So I think if you could provide further detail about the governance structures and how that's evolving to the committee, that would be really helpful. Another area of questions I had were around transparency, and again I was going to say that the AI year in review is very useful, and that information, would you commit to putting that level of information in the public domain, because what's on the website is quite sort of high level at the moment, so if you're doing an external version, that sounds good. And then linked to that, this is obviously a very fast-moving area. So would it be appropriate, Chair, to request a kind of annual update to this committee on how AI is being used within the Council so that we can review the policy and how it evolves?
And I certainly don't have any objections on that. What do other people think?
We can come back to it if people want to put some thoughts in.
Pick it up on future plan at the end.
And then the 4th question was about within the sector, really. I did a bit of searching, saw that the LGA has an AI hub, and there's quite a lot of resources for councils, both in terms of frameworks for how AI is used, but also best practice and what people are doing. Is the council actively involved in that, or other sector equivalents?
Okay, yeah, I'll start with the last one and then I might need to play back. So, yes, there was I forget the acronym, the Ministry for Local Government, MCHLG, is that what MHCLG, sorry, yesterday published a great local AI offer, and yes, we're involved in those discussions. Some of their offers and products aren't as mature as the ones we've already got in place, so take Magic Notes as an example. They have an equivalent version, but it isn't to the same standard. But yes, we are engaged with them. We regularly use it for resource to help us with our governance and or policies. So we are engaged there. Yes, we're going to publish onto the website it'll be a slightly different version of the one that I've shared with you, because it probably won't focus on our internal use of AI as much. It might mention it a little bit, but it's going to more focus on the use of AI for our residents and service users. So think Magic Notes and think Zoom for our customer service centre. But yes, we're currently putting that in an accessible format so that it can go on the website, because at the moment it's only a handful of paragraphs. I'm very sorry, I've lost track now of the couple of questions you asked. Governance, was it? Sorry. Yeah, so governance, the generative AI policy that was issued in, it was ratified in June 2004, is going back to my digital and customer experience board that I chair in 2 months' time for a review and also an update. The policy itself does need a bit of an update, but we've deliberately kept the policy as the framework rather than putting every detail of what we're operationally doing in that policy. In terms of sharing more widely, I think that was another question. The AI year in review, we're going to be doing those quarterly now. So we intend to distribute that to all staff at the council. So quarterly we'll be doing this is how we're doing, this is what we've been working on, come and talk to us if you want to engage more. And I'm happy to share, well, that will be shared widely anyway. Does that answer? Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thanks, Chair. I was fortunate with a group of other councillors to go through one of the trainings just to introduce councillors to what's available. And it's great to see that departmental breakdown to create those templates and frameworks, because understandably this is there to help. And it was also good to hear that the way that we've structured things with Microsoft or the other providers is that it's kept within our firewall, with that information's not going out. Great. But as councillors, we seem to fall outside of that. And certainly some of the access to tools that we could benefit from in terms of reviewing the volumes of data that we have to work through. I wasn't sure that that had particularly been thought through. And whilst we are a minor part of the big machine, I just thought that was a weak link in the policy, and I think from the Green Motion point of view, it's trying to make sure that we are covering all bases.
Yeah, sure. So happy to. We have 3 main IO tools, as you know: Microsoft Copilot, Magic Notes for primarily our in-person interactions, and Zoom for our customer-facing interactions. Zoom probably wouldn't be necessarily applicable in the councillor's use case, but Microsoft Copilot, yes, absolutely. We can allocate relevant licenses, and Magic Notes is the same as well. From a cost perspective, Magic Notes, we have a capacity license, so it won't cost us any more to create more templates. We have a large capacity usage. From a Microsoft Copilot point of view, again, the cost is quite minimal.
If I can just come back on it, it's just understanding people's uses, and it seems that those have been taken because they generically really suit some of the uses within council. But tools like LM Notebook that you can upload significant documents into and scrape or look for summaries, these outside of our firewall structure, I think that needs to be considered as part of this whole overview.
Yeah, the reason we made a decision on the policy to block access to some of those outside tools, so think ChatGPT and Google Gemini, etc., is because whereas the tools I've just described are ring-fenced, secure, within our boundary, our data is not being used to train them, etc., etc., and also they've got a commitment to going carbon negative on all of their usage in terms of AI usage as well. If we were to, we just need to review any proposed tools to ensure that they meet our same policy and our standards. A lot of them don't, truthfully.
Can I just add there, actually, that it's also, I mean, I've used LM Notebook myself at home, very good, useful tool, but it's actually possible to use Copilot in a very similar way if it's configured to do so. So you can do the same kind of thing, upload your own documents and get it to... so actually, I think you can get the same kind of result using the same kind of using the tools that we've already got. So, you know, I think, you know, we are always likely to have a restriction on what we're going to give access to outside for understandable reasons. But I completely support what you're saying about councillors needing to be considered as a cohort when we're talking about the tools, because I think that we need access to the same kinds of, well, this is the problem, isn't it? The same kinds of tools, but our use cases are different, and that's what needs to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Councillor David.
Thank you. Just linked to what you were saying, how kind of environmental considerations taken into account in terms of future decisions about adopting and further using AI technologies, and how will that be assessed as part of our council's carbon footprint?
Yeah, so there's actually a later version of the AI year in review that was sent to all staff on Friday that actually included some of that. So, for example, one of the reasons we're primarily trying to use Microsoft, and Magic Notes uses Microsoft in the background as well, from a platform, is because they are currently heading towards carbon neutral and will be carbon negative for their AI usage in the next few years, which is something that we want to push towards. And they also have a closed loop water, so their water usage is also very, very minimal in comparison.
Okay. One thing that strikes me is there might be a scenario where people use AI for something they could use a different method, either looking on the website or using Google, with less of an impact. How do we help to ensure that staff use the right tool for the right job? And councillors?
It's a good question. I think truthfully we've been trying to provide every possible tool for all sorts of jobs. I don't think we're also not trying not to restrict people in using those tools, because we want the adoption to be good. I think that's a thoughtful-provoking one, but I don't know if I've necessarily got an answer for you. Yeah, I don't think we're choosing people to use which tools, whichever one they would find the most useful. And each person's different as well. So, yeah.
Councillor Howes, then Councillor Simon.
Yeah, thank you. We're focusing a lot on the sort of technical uses of AI and how it would help officers and so on. Just giving, as an example, the planning department. I can see there are dangers of AI with the planning work. An officer might use AI to come up with a report for a planning application, and it could contain inaccuracies. Equally, the general public, people in the general public who are very savvy with this, could use AI to present objections to a planning application based on spurious case law. And apparently that has happened and is happening. So are the leaders of these departments on the ball, understanding the dangers, checking work or sampling work? Are they aware of the dangers of AI?
Planning is a great example there, where there can be a wealth of information. If you take, for example, the rugby as a good example of that, many thousands of submissions that it's not possible for a human or a single person to review and analyse in any reasonable timescale. So just picking up on your point about accuracy, yes, that needs to be considered, absolutely, but also it can also be sometimes more accurate than a human analysis. But you're right, it's where our head of planning and others engage with me and my colleagues to ensure that we don't just allocate access to the tools immediately with no guidance. There is a training program before they get access to these tools that we've described. We will configure templates for them and ensure they're working. But yes, there is a role there. Yeah. But yeah, just picking up around accuracy, it does work both ways. And trying to get it somewhere in the middle is where we've got to try and hit.
Councillor Simon.
I was going to raise a similar point. So can I just comment that when you publish the public version of what we're doing, that you reference the use of AI to analyse public comments, particularly in the field of planning, and the rugby would be a good example where it was openly stated that AI had been used to analyse.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and I think we should be transparent, and we will be. And we will openly state when we are using AI and why. And in that exact reason, Toby, was because there was such a large amount of submissions. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands, so I will just jump in myself. I was really glad this came to us to discuss here because I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's really good to see that there's the generative AI policy and things there already. Obviously, it's a very rapidly moving world, and I suspect if we wind back 2 years, we've gone on significantly, and it's good to hear this policy and things is getting updated. When that comes through, will that look into the world of agentic AI and that side of things as well, and are there any plans to use any of that within the council?
So we're reviewing agentic AI. We're not currently planning on using agentic AI. We've got a bit of a journey to get to before we would consider that, is the honest answer. We would need all of our relevant integrations to business systems configured and do quite a bit of testing. But what we are introducing, and is live right now on our website, is our bots that are integrated to things like waste. Our highways web bot goes live shortly. We've got another 13 different bots going live over the next couple of months. And they're getting great usage, but they aren't what I would call a full, they are very clearly labelled as a bot to the people that are using them, to avoid no confusion that they are interacting with a bot, not a person.
And that's great. And then in terms of that policy update, obviously, I think it'd be good to understand, I think, if you see this policy coming out of being more just AI and coming out across the council. And on that sort of note, then, whether the approval of using new AI tools within the council should come through a, let's call it a board or a steering group for actual approval rather than compliance with the policy, and if with AI having the potential to go and have impacts all over the place, including areas like HR, whether we should have HR and things involved in there where if AI was being used in use cases where you could go and see it replacing people's jobs and things there, that you wanted to make sure that that was steered appropriately in the usage and things was appropriately and that was dealt with carefully and sympathetically.
So currently the use of AI and or purchasing of any AI platforms goes through the Digital and Customer Experience Steering Group that I chair. Sitting on that includes Cherry Bennett, our Director of People and Change and HR, Chris Major, our Director of Place Management, Chris Wilford. A number of the directors and heads of service sit on that board for that exact reason, to ensure that we are factoring as well as we can all of the very appropriate considerations when any new tool comes through, and from a procurement point of view we ensure that that's the gateway before any purchase of any tool is granted.
Does anyone else? Councillor David.
I just wanted to clarify what the timeframe is for revising the policy and whether or not that can come back to this committee along with the governance framework.
Sure. So the policy is due to be reviewed in June. Where are we now? March. It's being reviewed right now, actually, as it happens, or the draft edit. So it could come back here once it's gone through the Digital and Customer Experience Board. That's normally where the policy would be ratified, and it could come back here at July, August time, if suitable. yeah, I can send that on. Yeah.
And I certainly think that makes sense with this being such a rapidly changing world that we, your proposal earlier around getting an annual update on this sounds a sensible one to be building into the forward plan. It's, if we look where this was even just 18 months ago, I know in my work then it's weekly that we're getting new things which people are wanting us to go through and adopt, and there's some very clever use cases and things which are coming through, but also some places where we need to be very cautionary and things as well. Cool. Any more for that, or we will close on that? Okay. That brings us to agenda item 10, the Q3 budget monitoring. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the Q3 budget monitoring report, so April to December 2025. Outlining the financial position at the end of the quarter. So as at the end of December, the council was forecasting a 1.659 million overspend against the revised revenue budget. That's after the use of the 9.83 million in contingency and the 1.721 million from the pay and grading reserve. So this is an improvement on the Q2 position by about 764,000. So things did get slightly better during the period. However, as you'll see from the report, Children's Services remains the most significant financial pressure. I've been saying this now for 2 or 3 years, with an overspend now predicted at 7.4 million. That's disappointing after we'd regained some stability over the first half of the year. But as I've pointed out on previous occasions, the cost of residential placements is now so high that we can be talking about very small changes in the number of young people in care, resulting in very, very significant moves in spending. In this quarter, 3 new placements resulted in £500,000 of pressure by year end. I'm having regular meetings with the Exec Director and the Director of Children's Services, along with Councillor May, the Children's Services portfolio holder. And I know that the service has launched a strengthened transformation programme, including placements task force, cost assurance work, longer-term sufficiency planning. But the increasing demand, cost and complexity of need still mean that getting control of the spending in this area is very, very hard indeed. Adult social care also has some pressure, although not to the same financial extent. There's been a 10% rise in demand for residential care. Overall, the service is predicting a relatively modest £551,000 overspend. Economic and Cultural Sustainable Development portfolio is another area forecasting a significant shortfall, with an estimated 3.136 million overspend. Overspend is perhaps not the right term, it's a kind of under-income rather than overspend, but a large proportion of this is due to lower than expected visitor numbers. We were budgeting for 1.1 million visitors. We're predicting it'll be more like 972,000 visitors, slightly fewer than the previous year. This is in line with what's happened across the sector around the country, but Heritage Services should be commended that whilst their visitor numbers are down on 24-25, their spend per head is up. And Heritage Services is still expected to return over £12 million of profit to the council, so this is still a major success story. It's also interesting to note that the increased housing benefit claims for temporary accommodation are up 53% year on year. Disappointingly, we think this is to do with a rise in no-fault evictions, with some landlords getting in ahead of the Renters' Rights Bill, which comes into effect in May. Fortunately, the council has increased its supply of temporary accommodation, otherwise this could have produced a much higher financial impact. On the upside, parking services are overperforming, just over £500,000 more than budgeted, and interest rates have been lower than expected with when the budget was set last year, so there's 1.4 million favourable Treasury performance. And there's also delay to some capital projects, so there's another 1.2 million saving on the borrowing requirement. You've also got some report on the capital programme. So the capital programme is forecasting 94.321 million spend against a revised budget of 149.537 million. So that's a variance of 55.216 million. Of that 55.216, 55.046, so the vast majority of it is rephased into future years. In other words, it's slippage in capital schemes. But in some cases, rephased into the future years means a few months delay. You know, that's the way budgets work, is that there is a cut-off date. For example, the delivery of our electric refuse vehicles accounts for £6 million of that rephasing, and they'll be delivered in June rather than March. So, you know, not all of these are kind of massive capital slippages. Some of them are one-off purchases that have just moved either side of the year-end boundary. The actual spend on the new household recycling centre for Bath will now come in a little later than planned, so again that slipped from this financial year to next, but the project's still due to finish on time in early autumn. So I'm not overly concerned by those kinds of things. Those look like perfectly reasonable slippages. I know that officers are continuing to put a considerable amount of effort into improving the speed and our ability to track our capital delivery. With regard to reserves, the Council's general unearmarked reserves remain at 12.6 million, which is within the risk-assessed range. However, if the revenue overspend cannot be mitigated, there would be requirement to draw on service-specific reserves and or the revenue budget contingency reserve at the end of the year, which will then need replenishing in future years. So, to wrap up, the Council's financial position remains challenging, as it has done for years now. It's an improved position based on the reporting in Q2, but there are still very persistent, significant pressures, especially in children's services. We continue to look at active mitigations across all portfolios. I have to say that I'm a little circumspect as to whether we can pull back the full 1.6 million by the end of the year. I think that seems unlikely. But as the report says, we have specific reserves set aside that we can use if that's the case. That's something we've managed to avoid any significant amount of doing in the last few years, and most councils have had to use reserves at year-end to a much more significant extent than we have, so we're still in a much better position than most. I'll draw it to a close there, and I'm happy to answer any questions the panel may have. Stuart, Section 151 officer, is here as well, so hopefully we can cover any questions you've got, but obviously we'll come back if we can't answer them now.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Do we have any questions? Councillor Housen.
Thank you. In your portfolio commentary, you've got the line, staffing pressures exist across waste and fleet services, legal services and project delivery team. Can you expand on that? Not sure what that means.
That means that I think in all of those cases, that means that we have had to fill with temporary staff where we've not had full-time staff. So recruiting to those areas has been difficult.
Councillor David.
Thank you. One area I wanted to ask about, which I noted in the documents, was 1 million approximately of invoices raised in 24-25 that are currently unpaid and may need to be written off. So I just wanted to ask about the nature of those and kind of what the learning is about this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And to be clear, we're not clear that they do need to be written off at this stage. We're flagging the fact that they may need to be written off. So in 24-25, Baines and Wiltshire and Swindon worked together with the ICB to explore a more consistent approach to determining the contribution that would be expected from the ICB to complex packages of care for children and young people. We raised invoices to the value of £1.27 million during that year. So far, we've only received £300,000 in payment of those invoices, and the balance is in dispute with the ICB. And it is the case that whilst we raised the invoices in the spirit of what we considered to have been agreed, there appears to have been some confusion with the local authorities and the ICB about what had been agreed at the time. I believe that Wiltshire and Swindon are in a similar position. We continue to ask the ICB to review the outstanding invoices with us. That's an ongoing process. Like I say, we haven't reached the point where we definitely are writing them off at this point. And on a more positive note, we have, having learnt from that experience, we've got more robust systems and procedures in place for the current financial year to make sure that the invoices we raise against the ICB will be honoured. And in the period up to the end of Q3, we'd already raised £464,000 of invoices which have been agreed. So I think we're in a better position now. But there appear to have been some teething problems around the position between ourselves and the ICB. And I think the same applies in Wiltshire and Swindon.
Anyone else? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Just a couple of clarities, if you wouldn't mind. One is page 23, sustainable transport delivery. Just what a clarification of what do we mean by increased income from network and traffic management? Is that parking fines, or what does that actually mean?
That's a good question. I don't know. I may need to come back to you on that.
If you could, great. Just looking at our regeneration shortfalls, Bath South Quays stands out as a significant issue. Can you give us any update on where we're at with that, or what is the projection for coming 12 months?
Obviously, that's not my portfolio directly. It's Councillor Roper's, but I know that there is extensive work going on South Quays. I think I'd rather get Councillor Roper to respond to you, actually, if that's okay, because I think he would be much more on top of that than I am.
Thank you, Chair. Whether we can note that, because we've raised this numerous times in the past and always been told it's coming, we've got something, and nothing materialises. So
yeah,
I'd like that.
So I suggest if we could get both answers included in the minutes, is that okay?
I'm sure. I mean, obviously, you can ask for a wider report if you want one. That's, if you for your work plan discussion, but if you require that.
More specifically on that building as much as anything. But strategic environmental targets. I suppose disappointing to see that we're at 1.76 megawatt of renewable energy against a target of 12. We've got, what, 3...
So are we confusing reports? So you
possibly.
I think you've gone on to the
I'm
next report.
Between all sorts of bits and pieces.
Yeah, no, I think you've gone on to the next report.
A precursor of a question to come.
Okay. Go back to the staffing costs. That's on this report?
Yeah.
Good. It's been blurring everything. 4.5 million was a number that we were given originally on the Bob programme. We've saved 1.5, but we've got an overspend of 1.72. We're forecast for £1 million saving next year, and the figure we're quoting is a different shortfall. To me, we quote 4.5 million is what we were going to save. We've saved £500,000. We're forecast to save another £1 million. That means we're still £3 million off. Can you clarify that that is really our actual position?
Well, I mean, we're not in the final position yet because the Being Our Best programme is ongoing. So I don't think it would be fair to say it's the final position. It is true that the pay and grading exercise didn't produce as much of a saving as we anticipated it would. I mean, in some ways, whilst that presents us with a financial challenge, I think it shows that it was an honest and robust process of actually looking at people's job roles and really genuinely looking at comparing them to market and working out whether they were valued correctly. And we were always approaching the Being Our Best programme as genuinely a programme of trying to evaluate the job roles properly, not as first and foremost a savings exercise. You know, I'm quite proud that we were able to give 60% of the workforce a pay rise. I think it's, you know, but yes, there is a cost implication there. Yeah.
Okay, I know you've stated that you're proud of that one, and we all applaud that. But obviously, as a programme, you know, it has significantly drifted from what we were all told the programme was meant to bring in. It's just trying to understand at what point, from that financial impact, where do we see that within the budgetary side of the council? Because we're here to analyse budget. It was a stated saving. It's not only disappeared, but it is not coming in the foreseeable future. And of course, from a resident's point of view, they're trying to understand our budget. We're here to scrutinise that. And 4.99% rise, when some of our residents won't have had pay rises, it's just trying to understand where that nuance of savings that were projected, where we're now backfilling that hole.
Yeah, sure. And I say I mean the pay, the annual pay budget is there to be seen. You know, there isn't a. So I'm not quite sure what you're asking about that 4.5 million saving. We are reporting ongoing. You've just played back the figures. You know, we are being open about what savings have been made against that. The savings that aren't realisable won't play into pay budgets and reductions in pay budgets either next year or in the future. I mean, there's the programme measurement, which is the kind of 4.5 million, and then there's the ongoing budget measurement. So yes, I think, you mentioned the 4.99. Again, I will defend the council tax rise, given that the council tax rise raises us 7 million, and we're spending another 6.5 million on social care. So I mean, it's the council tax rise really doesn't only barely covers just the rise in social care costs. So it's you know, there is pressure, and you know, a lot of the people who got pay rises through the Being Our Best process were our lowest paid workers, many of them in social care. So,
yeah, Councillor, I'm not disputing that one. It's knitting those numbers, and obviously you've said already that we're going to potentially be eating into reserves, and this is all part of that understanding, that picture of where those spends and savings haven't been or have been achieved. Thanks.
Stuart, yeah, do you want to come in on?
Would it be helpful if I provide a full reconciliation for the figures as part of the minutes?
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah, sure, Councillor Blackburn would appreciate that.
That give you what you need? That give you what you need? Yeah? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. And thank you. I think we covered most of the bits and pieces which I wanted to look at. I think it's a difficult position, and I think it's really good we got some of the stuff which we've been doing around children's services, where there's the scheme which we have with foster families, where we're enabling them to invest to save us the money of putting people into homes, and I think it's a really good move. I did want to touch into the capital stuff and the rephasing things through from there. Obviously, that's quite a large percentage of money which is moving through into next year. I appreciate some of that is just a capital spend in terms of we're buying some lorries and they're going to turn up, and that covers some of it, but that's not a good chunk of it. And with plans to spend this year's capital money and things instead, which are going to get impacted by these things going through, how do we make sure that that impact and things is minimised and we don't just go and create the same position for next year, or minimise. There's always going to be an element of it, I appreciate, but minimise that position.
Yeah, sure. And I think I mean, I would like to see the capital budget. I would like to see us predicting our capital spend more accurately, and I've said that each year, and I think that we are, as I say, we've centralised the team for managing capital projects, and I think that's starting to bear some fruit now with better prediction. We're putting in better tools for project management to allow that prediction to be better. I guess one of the reasons I'm not too worried about it from a financial point of view is that slippage in capital projects doesn't have a huge impact on, and often has a positive impact on the revenue budget, which is where all the pressure is. So I mean, I think I've said before, but I can't remember whether it was this meeting or whether I've said it elsewhere, but the capital budget isn't the same kind of beast as the revenue budget. And even if absolutely everything went to plan, we'd still be underspent by 10 to 20% because there's 10 to 20% of contingency in all of the projects. So if everything went to plan, you wouldn't spend the contingency, and so you'd be underspent. So it's a kind of, and I say the other thing to understand is the fact that you don't, we don't. The Treasury management function makes sure that we don't borrow money until we need it. So if projects do slip, it's not like we've gone and borrowed the money first. We will always be cash flowing it from our own cash reserves first, and then borrowing to backfill. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see the accuracy of the prediction of projects improve, but really that's not so much a financial problem as a sort of project management and planning problem. That's the primary reason I'd like to see it improve.
Thank you. And unless we have any other ones to note? Yes. Okay. Are we able to confirm the year-end budget report will be ready for July? Close, yeah, end of year one, end of close of quarter four.
Oh yeah. Year-end closure.
Sorry,
year-end closure report. Sorry, yes, yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, I don't see a problem. I think that'll come in on time.
Cool. Are we just noting that, or are we approving? Yeah, just noting. Okay, cool. Then we'll move on to agenda item 11, the corporate strategy performance. Councillor Elliott.
Me again. I mean, I'll be very brief on this. We agreed to bring the panel quarterly updates against the KPIs listed in the corporate strategy performance report. So the purpose of the report really is for transparency, not for me to kind of spiel on about it for ages. It's so that you can look at the report, see the KPIs, see if there's anything that stands out as requiring further investigation, further scrutiny, either by this panel or by highlighting it to one of the other panels as an appropriate topic for them to address. So my role here really, I mean, obviously this is, these are reports across the portfolio of the whole portfolio of things the council does. I'm unlikely to have any huge insight or detail into individual items on there, but it's just to highlight to you these are the things that are being measured, and for you to kind of identify if there's anything else that you want to look into further, basically.
Thank you. And on that note, does anybody have any of the items on there they'd like to look into further? Perhaps Councillor Blackman.
I think this is where...
Separate sheet paper. Separate sheet. It was just looking at that in the renewable energy side of it. Obviously, we're saying that we've only installed 1.76 megawatt. Against a target of 12. 2030 is just around the corner, and wanted to get an update as to was that a slippage, and have we genuinely got that runway ahead to deliver that target?
Yeah, and I'll have to come back to you with an answer because I don't have the details on the planned installation of renewable energy. I mean, we've obviously got some interesting projects potentially, like the putting the generator in the radial gate in the river, but I don't, which would, you know, assuming we can bring that project forward, that will make a very significant difference, I think, to the generation capability for the buildings specifically in Bath. But I'm happy to come back with or probably not me. I'm happy to request that you get an update on renewable energy installation plan for the next few years. I say, not my portfolio, not an area I have huge amounts of detail on.
Thank you. Are we okay to action Councillor Elliott to go and ask for that update and feed it back to the minutes? And hopefully the feedback is not no. Councillor David.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about some of the indicators that are on target, and in particular the household waste ones, where we're doing well. Is there a mechanism, and excuse me for not knowing this, for tightening those targets where we're doing really well? You know, that kind of suggests that the target could be more stretching. And at what point would that happen?
Yeah, well, so I think we periodically bring back I can't remember how often, whether it's annual or 2 years ago, but there's, I mean, these targets are, in some way, they're constantly under review. I mean, Cabinet could change them, but we've certainly brought them to this committee. We brought all of the KPIs to this committee to review. And I can't remember, forgive me, I can't remember when that last was, but we can certainly bring them back to this committee, and you can make recommendations on tightening them if you think that that's appropriate.
Maybe. I think what I was asking was whether or not that happens automatically, or whether the targets are set for like a 4-year period or something.
No, we can adjust them. I mean, obviously we need to be transparent about that, because if we're adjusting them, then the reporting doesn't line up from quarter to quarter, because, you know, we'll be reporting that we're, you know, X above target or something, and that'll move. So we need to be transparent about it when we are moving those. But yes, I mean, they can be changed, yes.
And just jump in on that, because I think it's probably just the right point on it. Could you talk through how the local outcomes framework will come and impact on these indicators and things going forward, and if we expect change from there?
Yes, I mean, I would expect there'll be quite significant change from that. We are doing some internal work on the local outcome framework, and I'm sure that and a lot of the things that we're wanting to measure mesh in with what we're required to measure under the local outcomes framework as well. But again, I'm sure we will be coming back to this committee with that. You know, the performance framework, and obviously we're only, you know, 14 months off or something, a new strategic plan for the council, so it'll play into that as well.
Anybody else? Okay, just one from me, which is just around the, it comes on that strategic plan and things as well. We've got part of the strategic plan is our good jobs for our residents. And I know in these indicators here, we've got a median wage for Baines residents of 40,500 better than the UK average, but the wage for those who work in Baines is below the median average, and we can tell from the way lots of the housing stock and things will work in Baines. That means we've got lots of people who will be living in high-value houses who are having to commute out of the area, and lots of the people who work in Bath can't afford to go and live in Bath, and are having to go and commute in with all the environmental impacts and things that goes and has as well. Would it be possible at some point to get an update on how we are progressing on the good jobs part of the strategic plan, and understand what initiatives we've got there and how they're delivering?
I'm sure it would. Again, that's Councillor Roper's portfolio around economic development. But I'm sure he would be happy to bring back a report to the committee.
Unless we have anything else, we will Thank you very much for the reports. We'll move to the final item on the agenda, which is the panel work plan. Anybody got anything which they'd like to go and raise through from now? We've had a few things come through in the course of the meeting, I think, anyhow. Okay. Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else within there, then I will call us to a close. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. Oh.
Do you already capture the things that we'd mentioned at the beginning of the meeting? Okay, cool.
Okay, in that case, we are closed. Thanks very much.